everyone, and welcome back to the Financial Podcast. I'm Olivia, your host, and today we have a really significant development to discuss that could impact the wallets and lives of millions of Americans. It's been making headlines, and we need to break down what's actually happening. Just this week, early on Thursday morning, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a massive piece of legislation that's been dubbed by President Trump as the One Big Beautiful Bill. This bill represents a stunning victory for both President Trump and House Speaker Mike Johnson, especially considering that its passage seemed uncertain just days before. Speaker Johnson himself noted, "Sometimes it's good to be underestimated, isn't it?" after the all-night negotiating sessions. President Trump played a major role in getting this done, making impassioned appeals directly to GOP lawmakers to secure their support. Now, before we dive deep into the details of this complex bill and what it means, I want to take a moment to ask for your support. If you find this information helpful and want to stay updated on key financial and economic news like this, please take a second right now to hit that subscribe button below. And if you appreciate this breakdown, giving the video a like really helps us reach more people who need this information. Thank you so much for your support. It truly makes a difference. All right, let's get into what this bill actually is. At its core, the One Big Beautiful Bill is a sweeping package focused on tax cuts and spending reductions. It aims to fulfill many of President Trump's campaign promises. The vote was incredibly close in the House, passing by a narrow margin of 215 to 214. This razor-thin victory highlights the deep divisions even within the Republican conference, as Speaker Johnson could only afford a handful of defections. Only 2 Republicans ultimately voted against the bill, Representatives Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Warren Davidson of Ohio. House Freedom Caucus Chairman Andy Harris of Maryland voted present. Notably, Representative Chip Roy of Texas, who had previously been a significant critic, ultimately voted yes after changes were made. This legislation is structured as a reconciliation bill. In simple terms, that means it's primarily designed to impact the federal budget, focusing on spending, saving, or raising money. Reconciliation bills are significant because, unlike most legislation in the Senate, they are generally not subject to the filibuster. This is crucial for Republicans who control only 53 Senate seats and wouldn't have the 60 votes needed to overcome a filibuster on a regular bill. One of the most significant aspects of the bill involves taxes. A central piece is making permanent essentially all of the individual income tax breaks that were introduced in the GOP's 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. These cuts were set to expire at the end of 2025. Republicans argued that extending these cuts is critical and that without this bill, the average taxpayer would face a 22% tax hike, which they say is equivalent to about 9 weeks of groceries for the average American family. Beyond extending the 2017 cuts, the bill includes several new, albeit temporary, tax breaks. It aims to eliminate taxes on qualified tips and overtime pay. There's also a new temporary deduction for the interest paid on loans specifically for American-made cars. Seniors over 65 would receive a new tax deduction. The bill also temporarily boosts the standard deduction, increasing it by $1,000 for individuals to $16,000 and by $2,000 for joint filers to $32,000, which reduces the amount of income subject to tax. The child tax credit is also temporarily increased by $500 to $2,500 from 2025 through 2028. A major point of contention during the House negotiations involved the state and local tax, SALT. Currently capped at $10,000, the bill increases this cap to $40,000 for individuals and other taxpayers with incomes up to $500,000. For married individuals filing separately, the cap is $20,000 with an income limit of $250,000. This was a critical change, pushed up from an initially proposed $30,000 cap to win over key Republican holdouts from high-tax states like New York, New Jersey, and California. For businesses, the bill expands the deduction for small businesses, including partnerships and S corporations, allowing them to subtract 23% of their qualified business income from their taxes, up from 20%. It also proposes permanently doubling the death tax exemption, which is seen as a benefit for family-owned farms. The bill also seeks to renew the Opportunity Zone program. On the spending side, the bill proposes significant reductions to major national safety net programs, Medicaid and food stamps, also known as SNAP. The proposed cuts to Medicaid are substantial, estimated at $880 billion over the next decade. According to the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, these cuts could result in an estimated 10.3 million people losing Medicaid coverage by 2034 and 7.6 million becoming uninsured over the next decade. The changes to Medicaid include imposing work requirements for childless adults aged 19 to 64, mandating 80 hours per month of work, education, or community service to maintain coverage. Enrollees would also need to verify eligibility twice a year instead of annually. The bill also penalizes states that provide Medicaid coverage to undocumented immigrants by reducing federal funding. For SNAP, new requirements are also proposed, shifting more program costs to states and potentially saving up to $300 billion over 10 years. Republicans argue these changes will reduce waste and fraud. Democrats, conversely, warn that millions will lose access to essential health care and assistance. Another major area of change is the student loan program. The bill includes an overhaul that aims to achieve $330 billion in budget reductions and savings. It proposes streamlining the current variety of repayment options into just two: a standard plan with fixed payments over 10 to 25 years, and a repayment assistance plan with less generous terms than existing alternatives. The bill also allocates significant funding to border security and defense spending. For cracking down on illegal immigration, the proposal puts over $140 billion towards President Trump's plan, including $50 billion for a border wall, $45 billion for detention centers, and $14 billion for deportations. Defense spending would see an increase of around $150 billion, which includes about $20 billion for President Trump's proposed Golden Dome missile defense system. The One Big Beautiful Bill touches on many other areas as well. It phases out Biden-era energy tax credits sooner than planned, particularly those for electric vehicles and renewable energy. It also proposes expanding the leasing of public lands for drilling, mining, and logging, while accelerating government approval processes. Royalty rates paid by companies extracting oil, gas, and coal would be reduced. A provision eliminates the $200 tax on gun silencers. The bill also seeks to prohibit Medicaid funds from going to Planned Parenthood. Interestingly, the bill includes the creation of new Trump savings accounts for children born between 2024 and 2028, with a $1,000 federal contribution at birth and options for families to add more annually. The bill would also allow families to use new vouchers for education outside of public schools. One provision that has caught the attention of the tech world, and perhaps less discussed widely, is a section added by the House Energy and Commerce Committee that targets AI regulation. This clause effectively bans all U.S. states and their political subdivisions from enforcing any law or regulation regarding artificial intelligence models, systems, or automated decision systems for a period of 10 years following the bill's enactment. Critics argue that this is particularly concerning because there are currently no federal U.S. laws or regulations governing AI. President Biden did create an AI Bill of Rights and an executive order, but these were not enforceable laws, and President Trump has reportedly gotten rid of the executive order. This ban on state-level AI regulation without establishing a federal framework would leave the U.S. without any official government oversight of AI for a decade. While supporters might argue this accelerates commercial AI development, critics warn it leaves consumers exposed to significant privacy, safety, and antitrust risks, as state laws currently provide protections in areas like hiring, housing, and accessing personal data that would be put on hold. There has been pushback specifically on this point, with a bipartisan group of state attorneys general sending a letter to Congress urging them to reject this language, stressing the necessity of state regulations in the absence of federal action. Now let's talk about the fiscal impact. Despite including significant spending cuts, the present version of the bill is not projected to be revenue neutral. In fact, according to analyses mentioned in the sources, it's expected to add a considerable amount to the national debt. Estimates vary, but reports suggest it could increase the deficit by around $6 trillion over the next decade, or more conservatively, around 3 to 3.3 trillion. This is largely because the trillions in tax cuts, particularly making the 2017 tax cuts permanent, are projected to outweigh the spending reductions. Republican deficit hawks who voted for the bill justify this by arguing that the tax cuts will stimulate the economy, leading to increased GDP, investment, and job creation. They claim this economic growth will generate enough additional revenue to offset the deficit in the long term. Ways and Means Chairman Jason Smith stated the legislation is projected to increase U.S. real GDP by an estimated 5.2% over the next 4 years and lead to 6.6 to 7.4 million full-time jobs saved or created in that same period. He also claimed families could gain over $13,000 more in take-home pay, and workers could see wage increases of more than $11,000. However, some fiscal conservatives within the GOP still voiced concerns, pushing for deeper spending cuts or narrower tax reductions to better balance the bill. Representative Chip Roy, despite ultimately voting yes, stated the bill initially falls profoundly short regarding cuts. Representative Lloyd Smucker and over 30 other Republicans signed a letter emphasizing that under the House framework, the bill must not add to the deficit, stating any additional tax cuts or spending increases beyond the projected growth revenue must be offset. This internal conflict between fiscal conservatives and moderates who resisted deep cuts to programs like Medicaid and food assistance highlights the delicate balancing act House leadership faced. The impacts of this bill are expected to vary significantly by state and region. States that expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, like California and New York, could face higher financial burdens to maintain coverage if they don't compensate for federal cuts. Southern states might see state spending on Medicaid increase significantly. Rural communities, particularly in states like Kansas, Oklahoma, and Alabama, could see hundreds of rural hospitals close due to reliance on Medicaid funding, potentially leaving communities without emergency care. States that currently fund coverage for undocumented immigrants could see coverage losses due to penalties in the bill. States with large Medicaid populations will also need to increase taxes or cut benefits to offset the federal reductions. The increase in the SALT cap, while temporary, is a clear benefit targeted at residents of high-tax states, which were key for winning over certain House Republicans. So, where does the bill go from here? Having passed the House, it now moves to the Senate for consideration. This is far from the finish line. Republicans in the Senate have already signaled that they plan to make changes of their own. The Senate Budget Committee is preparing its version of the bill. Once both the House and Senate pass their respective versions, any differences will need to be resolved. This could happen through exchanging amendments or via a conference committee. Changes can and likely will be introduced at every step of this process. There's also a timeline pressure. President Trump and Speaker Johnson have expressed a desire to sign the bill into law by July 4th. Additionally, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has warned that the U.S. is likely to hit the debt ceiling in August. This bill includes raising the debt ceiling by $4 trillion, so lawmakers are under pressure to finalize the package before their summer recess. However, there are potential hurdles in the Senate beyond just negotiating changes. Reconciliation bills, while avoiding the filibuster, are subject to the Byrd Rule, which allows senators to remove provisions deemed extraneous or not primarily related to the budget. Given the wide range of policy issues covered, especially the AI regulation ban, parts of the bill could be vulnerable under this rule. Some Senate Republicans are even considering splitting the bill into smaller pieces to pass the more popular parts. This bill is truly massive and complex, touching on nearly every aspect of domestic policy, from taxes and healthcare to immigration, defense, and even emerging technologies like AI. Its potential impacts are wide-ranging, and the debate surrounding it highlights significant disagreements about the role of government, fiscal responsibility, and societal priorities. Whether it passes the Senate in its current form or undergoes significant changes remains to be seen, but its passage through the House is a major step forward for President Trump's agenda. Understanding the nuances of legislation like this is so important for managing your own financial life and understanding the broader economic landscape. I hope this deep dive has helped clarify some of the key components and potential impacts of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Again, if you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the Financial Podcast channel if you haven't already. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you important analyses like this. We'll be keeping a close eye on this bill as it moves through the Senate, and we'll bring you updates as they happen. Thank you so much for watching. Stay informed, stay financially savvy, and I'll see you in the next video.